absence. And then the other extreme is, can you say that ijma' existed even though it was only one person who held that opinion but nobody disagreed? It's called ijma' sukuti, right? A consensus from silence. Well, in any case, so his ijma' theory is, it makes sense for him to say that the three sources are one. The three sources at the end, it's a little bit of a sleight of hand, but the sources are essentially the Quran and the Sunnah, which are one, and the ijma' is not going to do much, which of course is not the case for somebody like Abu al-Husayn al-Basri. Abu al-Husayn al-Basri is very explicit that ijma' can arise from ijtihad. When all the jurists agree, with or without a text, on something that's binding to us, because they didn't agree for no good reason. And why would you reinvent the wheel? Or in fact, for Basri, is essentially how the law could proceed without some consensus. We can't keep arguing about everything all the time. Yeah, anyway, I can talk about consensus forever. There are all kinds of interesting things. In modern times, in the 19th century, there was an Abadi scholar who said, what if all scholars agree that coffee is prohibited? Would that be a consensus or just a coincidence of agreement? And he said it would be a coincidence of agreement. You know why? Because he thinks ijma' has to have a foundation. Right? This is just, they all don't like coffee or decide that maybe for political reasons it's bad to avoid it, which is different from saying we will interpret the Prophet's trips that are short or long, a certain length, to be indicative of when you can shorten the prayer or when you can combine. Right? So for some people, ijma' is still tied to the text. And for some people, it just is the agreement, which is valuable anyway, even if you can't tie it to a text. And for others, it's just the agreement of all Muslims. And how can you argue against that? If all Muslims think that that there are only 5-time prayers, you can't, as an outsider, just decide that they're all wrong. Now let's get to the Shafi'i side, because the law is not Sunni or Islamic or anything like that. It's more specific. The law is Shafi'i, and most of his usul al-fiqh, to the extent that I would stop my reading and go back and check, he's always involved in refuting other positions, like Hanafi positions or Maliki positions, in the choices he makes. For example, commands. In principle, do commands indicate that you do the act once in a lifetime? Do they demand repetition in principle? Now, of course, in circumstances you solve these problems, but what is the default? Is the default of a command is that it indicates repetition, that the act should be done multiple times, should be done immediately, or should be done within a window, should be done, what else? Yeah, multiple times, or immediately, or does it even establish an obligation to begin with? Because a command could establish something else, right? Less than these are the three examples, and these discussions get to be thicker and bulkier in later usul al-fiqh texts. But he has the basic idea, and his choices are really very easy ways to just defend Shafi'i doctrines. At the end, whenever he thinks that there are bad arguments, he has examples from Hanafi and Maliki law. People who think that the subject of usury are these 6 articles, that are 4 of them are food and 2 of them are currency. It's gold, silver, and then wheat, dates, etc. Oh, they just don't notice. This is talazum. This is just, it so happened that these 6 were food and were usurious, or subjects of usury. But there's another reason that's not about the fact that they are food, etc. Or about the fact that they're measurable, right? So he's acting against the Hanafi doctrine that they're measurable. So at the end of the day, it's not a very clean exercise. The choices within usul al-fiqh possibilities. It's a very Shafi'i exercise. I think the conclusion is in his head before he makes the argument. Why would you not do that? The one thing that concerns philosophers is this consistent idea of the 2 worlds. The religious law exists or applies here. But there is another world, right? The world of the ihya and the world of the reality that is not completely divorced from this world, but it's really not it. So a good example, actually this is also plagiarized from the Qillani, but it's a very important example. What is the law of God when I marry my sister, not knowing that she's my sister? I did my best. I exhausted all the tests. And the woman I married, I thought was not my sister. Is God's law that this is not marriage? And the answer is no. God's law is that this is marriage. Okay, this is really God's ruling here, because I did my best. I'm not a God. I'm a human being. So I could get it wrong. There is nothing wrong about doing exactly the wrong thing because of ignorance. That's the right thing. And it's not only that it's in the world of the appearances and this bad world that's changing constantly, that there is a reality here. Now Shafi'is have a distinction between hukm al-qada and hukm al-diyana, meaning there is something that the judge could get and get wrong. So if the judge decides that a certain woman is married to a certain man based on the testimony of two people who are actually grave sinners and therefore or liars, that marriage is not real. But you know why? Because we could discover it in this world. So if these two witnesses come after the ruling and tell the judge we lied, that should be negated. That ruling should be negated, not for Hanafis. Hanafis say, no, the ruling was right at the time, it doesn't get negated. In fact, the Hanafis actually have a very clever argument. They say, when these two people gave their testimony, based on our best knowledge, at the time of the testimony, they were shown to be truthful, or presumptively truthful. Therefore, that ruling was correct. When they told us that they were liars, after the ruling, that makes them fusaq. So what they said after the ruling doesn't work. They're adamant that the judge rules based on that incomplete evidence, and that becomes final. But the Shafi'is think, there is a distinction between hukm al-qada and hukm al-diyana. That is, the Shafi'i woman, for example, not believing that the ruling of the judge is correct, gets to escape and not be accessible sexually to her husband. Okay? But now, move with me just one step further. Because what if we don't have this knowledge forever? We're going to live and die not knowing that these two people were liars. That's God's law. So I could be married to my sister. And that would be marriage in the eyes of God, because there's no way for us to know now. When we know then, and God's law, it won't be called God's law then, it will be something else. I mentioned Juwayni, Ghazali, and Mazari, and the reason is, and I avoid Ibn Rushd, just because he's my friend, so I can't bring him up in this discussion. But there is a clear bias in Abu Abdullah al-Mazari for Ghazali and against Juwayni in that same exercise. That's usul al-fiqh. Why? Because Juwayni's Burhan has many moments where he's willing to say that religious knowledge is not certain. How do we know this tawatur thing? Okay. Also, Juwayni has a topology of knowledge and what is possible, what is certain, right? What you cannot deny. And the things that, it's possible that when everybody ran out of this building and they said there was fire, that they were all motivated by one idiot who said there was fire. And that's tawatur. They are all telling you there was fire inside, and in fact there is no fire. They just got it from one person. So Juwayni is careful. I mean, he never tells you a lot of the sunnah is really just rubbish. He doesn't say that. But he comes closer to favoring the ways of a physicist, right? That's how Mazari understands it. And of course, when you go back to Al-Burhan, he's not unreasonable. There are moments of doubt in Juwayni. Ghazali doesn't have that. So I have this paragraph to stimulate the discussion. Ghazali was a student of Juwayni. His Mustasfa owes a clear debt to Juwayni's Burhan. Why would a reader of Juwayni's Burhan find it deserving of blame, undeserved by Ghazali in his Mustasfa? In Idah al-Mahsul, من علم الأصول, which is Mazari's text, which by the way, Sizkeen believed was missing and Brooklyn believed was missing, and it ended up showing up from one of the libraries of Nashur's library, and it was published now by Dar al-Gharb al-Islam. It's not complete though, it's missing a little bit, but Mazari sees the student and the follower, Ghazali, to have succeeded where the teacher, Juwayni, failed. The difference comes down to how each one of them considered the nature of religious knowledge. Juwayni found much fault with the arguments of Muslim theologians, or mutakallimun, which arguments seem to benefit non-Muslim philosophers. So really it's these moments, and if you look for them, you find them. You notice that Juwayni has no problem leaving you with the impression that, that's what we do, but we're not really sure, or that there is a way for observation and the physicists and the metaphysicians to give us more information. And actually, Mazari has a hunch, I think he's right about this, that if Juwayni were to live longer, he would have done more philosophy and may have changed a lot of his views too. So Juwayni comes close to being a philosopher, at least a political philosopher in my view, which is something I don't see Ghazali as being able to do. Because, the philosopher has to have the risk of believing nothing at all, or believing something other than what he started with. And I don't get the sense that Ghazali is ready for that, was able to do that. Okay, if that's enough provocation. The point of Qiyas al-Ghaib al-Shahid, it's these two worlds, right? There is really, I can't find that law that allows Ghazali to do it sometimes and not do it sometimes. And Mazari is more succinct in saying that you shouldn't do it unless there is a reason. And بغير سبب جامع. But this sabab jama in his application, it begins and ends with a commitment to the religion. Why? Because physics and metaphysics are not conclusive. That's not explicit in Ghazali. Maybe I can't, it's explicit somewhere and I'm ignorant of it. But one thing that makes Abu Adl al-Mazari much more capable of making the case, he says basically, look, we can ask what the physicists do. When they keep making observations and they say here's a cause and here's an effect, at the end of the day, they hit a wall because nature has things that just happen, magnets. They say when they can't explain it, they say it's khasiyya. It's like that. And that's a very powerful argument, actually very powerful in my mind in modern times too. Okay, so when people say, well, Big Bang is the best interpretation of the world, well, do you know this is just one corner of the world or the whole thing? No, we don't. Are you sure about the red colors and the blue colors? That this light is coming towards us or away from us? Well, it's what we know. It's what we think. A lot of physics and a lot of astronomy and everything basically other than mathematics is inconclusive. So this is something that some people notice. If Ghazali noticed that and he knows that, and that's why he begins and ends with the religion, that would be a reasonable position because that means that he knows that philosophy is not productive. As I say, when he talks about the subject of the sciences in the beginning of the text, the divisions of the ulum, the general knowledge for him is kalam. So this is just as close to saying that physics and metaphysics don't lead to anything. We know that. So maybe other thoughts will come to me with the questions. Sure.
Thank you very much. Very much enjoyed your reflections and provocations. I'd love to hear your thoughts on a few things. Ghazali's attachment to the madhab is a bit out of pattern with a lot of his own predecessors on the Sufi end. Abu Talib al-Makki, Abu al-Hakam al-Marajan, who's our predecessor, Muhyiddin al-Arabi, they all have quite a tenuous relationship with the madhab. Sort of a non-denominationalist streak in them, which I don't sense in the Mustasfa, which leads me to make the statement that Sufis and Usulis are often going hand in hand. It's been recognized for quite a long time in Andalus and Maghrib that many of the Sufis were Usulis at the very highest level in Andalus, and the Maghrib Cornell talks about this in his book. I do as well. And the text, the Mustasfa, being at the final phase of his life, faced it if nobody told me that it's